Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Humanities Initiatives grant program offered by the National Endowment for the Humanities. My name is Julia Nguyen. I'm a program officer in the Division of Education Programs and part of the leadership team for this program. And joining me today is my colleague, Program Analyst Emily Brantley. This webinar is designed to provide examples and explanation in support of the guidelines, also known as the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, available at the program webpage, which can be reached by going to NEH.gov or by clicking on the links in this video's description. These guidelines are for applications submitted during the 2021 cycle to fund projects beginning as early as February of 2022. Please note that this recording is not a replacement for the specific requirements laid out in the NOFO, and when questions arise, you should first reference that document. I will begin with an overview of the purpose and goals of this program, and then move into specific requirements and questions to consider as you develop your application. Please know that we provide sample narratives and are available to answer questions and review optional draft proposals during the application process. I and my colleague will discuss these further near the conclusion of this recording. Humanities Initiatives grants strengthen the teaching and study of the humanities at institutions of higher education by developing new humanities programs, resources, or courses, including those in digital formats, or by enhancing existing ones. Projects must be organized around a core topic or set of themes drawn from humanities areas such as history, philosophy, religion, literature, and composition and writing skills, to name just a few. Remember that you're applying to the National Endowment for the Humanities, so keep the humanities at the core of your project. NEH welcomes applications that are modest in scope, duration, and budget, as well as applications for expansive long-term projects. These grants are designed to be flexible to fit your project and your institution's needs. Essentially, if you want to do a project that will impact humanities teaching and learning at your college or university, and you can do it in 1 to 3 years for $1 to $150,000, this may be the grant for you. This program supports a wide range of activities from foundational curricular planning to creating or revising bridge programs, dual enrollment programs, majors, minors, certificates, concentrations, honors programs, first-year seminars, capstone courses, and pathways to graduation or transfer to four-year institutions. It supports developing or enhancing curriculum-focused resources like oral histories, films, teaching modules, podcasts, mapping tools, and guidelines on how to use these humanities resources in the classroom. But wait, there's more. It also supports opportunities for faculty members to study together to improve their capacity to teach the humanities. Partnerships and collaborations with museums, libraries, historical societies, other institutions of higher education, local K-12 school systems, and others are also welcome. I would emphasize here that while partnerships and collaborations are welcome, projects should serve a key audience of students and/or faculty from the applicant institution itself. These are just a few ideas of what you can do with this grant. Remember that it is flexible and it can be tailored to suit your institution's humanities needs. There are 5 different branches of the Humanities Initiatives program. In addition to the overarching colleges and universities program, which is open to any college or university in the United States, there are also branches that specifically serve tribal colleges and universities, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, and community colleges. You may find that your college or university is eligible to apply under more than one of these branches, but you'll need to pick which one branch you'll be submitting your application to. For example, let's say that your school is an HBCU, and it could also come in under the broad category for colleges and universities. You're allowed to choose whichever branch you prefer, but in general, we recommend that if you're eligible, apply under one of those more specific branches rather than under the general broad colleges and universities category. Your project may also be a good fit for another NEH grant program. For example, Humanities Initiatives projects that connect humanities and non-humanities departments may also be a good fit under our Humanities Connections grant program, and those applications are due in mid-September. However, because these two programs have overlapping review periods, you must choose whether to submit your project to one or the other, because you can't submit multiple applications to NEH for what is essentially the same project. If you or your institution want to apply for more than one project, that's absolutely allowed as long as they are different and unique projects and don't have overlapping costs. There's no limit on how many different applications one institution can submit under this grant category. The key here is that you can only submit one application per unique project. Projects may, but need not be related to the cultural identity or history of the applicant institution. For example, it would be allowable for a Hispanic serving institution to submit a proposal on African American literature, or for a tribal college to submit a proposal on Shakespeare or any other humanities topic. So whatever topic you choose is really up to you as the applicant and what you think would be most useful for your institution and your students. Additionally, please know that although the NEH does have a number of interest areas, they're listed here on the slide and they're in the NOFO, your projects do not have to fit within one of those interest areas. These are simply ways for NEH to feature certain themes, but they are not requirements for applying for this program, nor do they have any impact on the review of your proposal. At our website, NEH.gov, within the program web pages, you will find lists of previously funded projects. We also offer several sample narratives as examples of well-written applications. Each of the 5 branches within the Humanities Initiatives umbrella has different sample narratives, though all of them could potentially be helpful to you as examples of Humanities Initiatives projects. So we strongly recommend that you explore the samples on each of the 5 pages and don't just limit yourself to the one category to which you will be applying. These samples are not complete applications. Some of their attachments have been redacted, but they do contain the narrative, the reading lists, work plans, and other key attachments that could be helpful references to you as you write your application. Before we go further, I want to say a bit more about eligibility. It's important to ensure that you are affiliated with an eligible college or university because this program prohibits individuals from applying. This is an institutional grant program. U.S. accredited public or 501c3 private institutions of higher education are eligible to apply, and there are additional eligibility details for each of the branches of the program, which are provided on pages 3 through 5 of the NOFO. Individuals, federal entities, foreign entities, and for-profit entities are not eligible to apply. And again, as we mentioned earlier, collaboration with other organizations is welcome, but the project director must be employed by the applicant institution. So the NOFO. The NOFO is your blueprint for how to build a strong application. We encourage you to become very familiar with the NOFO and to use it really as your guiding map to what we hope will be success. Just a little bit on how the NOFO is organized. The first section, pages 1 through 5, is descriptive. This section really describes what the program is about, what we're looking for, who's eligible, that sort of thing. The second section, pages 6 through 22, section D, provides the specifics of exactly what to include in your application and how to format it. And we especially want to call your attention to the application components table on page 16. This can really be a checklist to make sure that you've included everything you need. This would include things like page limits, how to save and title your attachment files, all of those important little details that will help make sure that your application is complete. You also want to keep in mind the all-important review criteria on pages 22 and 23.
The narrative is the most important part of your application because it contains the substantive intellectual components of your project. Your narrative should contain these 6 sections, which you can find detailed in section D of the NOFO. Refer to this document for the specific questions you should address under each of these section headers. I encourage you to organize your narrative in this order, using these section headers and taking care to address each of the respective questions for each section, as this will help reviewers know exactly where to go to find the information they're looking for. The narrative should be no more than 15 double-spaced pages with 1-inch margins and a font size no smaller than 12 points. You'll notice that each section is tied to one or more of the review criteria, which can help you understand how each section will be evaluated during the review process. In the intellectual rationale section, you'll want to explain why now. What makes your project compelling? What makes your project important to your institution and to the humanities? What kind of impact will your project have? Connect it back to teaching and learning at your institution. Narrative space is limited, so I like to encourage applicants to give a thorough overview and use specific and strategic examples to illustrate your points and bring your application to life for the reviewer. If intellectual rationale is the why, content and activities is the how. How will you make your project happen? What are the texts and resources that will serve as the foundation for your project? What are you going to do during your project and why? Think of this as a space to summarize and highlight key pieces from the detailed work plan and 2-page maximum reading list you will include as additional attachments, contextualized within the bigger picture of your narrative. Go beyond a simple schedule or list of readings in your narrative to explain the rhyme and reason for how your project will unfold and why you've chosen to do it this way. This section is your opportunity to take us inside your project so we can actually see and imagine it unfolding in real life. The intellectual quality of your project relies heavily on the quality of the directors, institutional and visiting scholars, consultants, and contributors involved with your project. Grant funding can be used to bring visiting scholars and experts to your institution, as well as to work with local experts, such as museum professionals, library or archive staff, public, oral, and local historians, and others. The resumes for key personnel attachment is a great place to include additional details about your project team that you cannot fit in your narrative summary. You are allowed 2 resume pages for each key person on your team. I also strongly recommend securing and including letters of commitment from each of the individuals, entities, and organizations you'll be working with as part of your project. These letters can be simple email exchanges or more formal letters. Reviewers just want to see confirmation that these people are legitimately on board. Some other items to note. 1, students can be paid for work done on your project, but NEH funds cannot be used for tuition remission or to pay for work done for academic credit. And 2, the institutional grant administrator will handle budgeting and institutional requirements on your end, as well as facilitating official interactions with the NEH. The grant administrator and project director must not be the same person. The institutional context section of your narrative will be supplemented by your 1-page institutional profile and your institutional letter of support attachments. When thinking of who to select to write your letter of long-term institutional support, you want to balance getting the highest ranking academic official possible, say your dean, provost, or president, with having someone who can write a thoughtful and personal letter that demonstrates familiarity with and full-bodied support for your project. NEH reviewers love to see not just the impact of this project during your grant period, but also the ripple effects of NEH funding that continue on beyond the end of your grant period. If this grant is a seed, how will your project ensure it grows and continues to blossom even after your 1 to 3 years are up? How can you extend the reach of your project, either at your institution or with a wider audience? And finally, every educator's favorite, evaluation and assessment. This section will eventually tie into the annual and final reports for NEH that will be required of funded projects. NEH does not require a specific assessment format or method. you should create an evaluation plan that will best assess the impact of your project. Your narrative and attachments should be succinct, self-explanatory, well-organized, and free from technical terms and jargon. You want to balance breadth and depth, being at once clear and concise, while also being sufficiently descriptive and illustrative. You are writing your application for an audience of NEH reviewers, so write with both specialists in your field and generalists from outside your field in mind, as both will be reviewing your application. As you're adding attachments to your grants.gov application package, be sure to only attach PDFs. If you accidentally attach a Word, Excel, JPEG, or other file, your application will be automatically marked as ineligible by our system. So please make sure that you and your institutional grant administrator are careful to only include PDFs as attachments. Aside from the narrative and subsequent attachments, your application will also include a budget using the research and related budget form that's preloaded in your grants.gov application portal. You'll complete this form within grants.gov, and it will automatically integrate into your application so you do not have to include it as a separate attachment. Because this is a government-wide form, be sure to read pages 8 through 16 of the NOFO for exactly how to fill it out for this grant program's purposes. Note that all projects are required to submit a budget justification to complement the budget form itself. This can be in any format you choose: bullet points, a narrative, spreadsheets and tables, or some combination of the above. Just be sure to attach this as a PDF saved as justification.pdf to your budget form. Speaking of NEH funding, it's also important to be aware of NEH's funding restrictions. You can find a more complete listing of funding restrictions on pages 22 to 23 of the NOFO, but I want to caution you against some of the most common pitfalls we see. The NEH cannot fund the promotion of particular political, religious, or ideological points of view, advocacy for a particular program of social or political action, or support of specific public policies or legislation. The best antidotes to these are to include diverse and varied voices, scholars, and sources on any topic, but especially for things that might be considered hot topics. Present participants with unbiased information and allow them to draw their own conclusions. Root contemporary, real-world issues in the humanities, especially history, and focus on that humanities content in your application. And avoid buzzwords, language, and goals related to advocacy and activism, especially for hot topic issues. What you might see as the application of the humanities to real-world situations, a reviewer might see as advocating for a particular cause. But by being cautious of differing viewpoints, you should be able to sidestep these sticky areas. The NEH also cannot fund projects that fall outside of the humanities. We most often see this with projects that try to incorporate the creation or performance of art, or projects that involve participants doing creative writing, autobiographies, memoirs, or creative nonfiction. We also sometimes see this with projects that focus on basic foreign language instruction, social science research or policy studies, or projects that focus on pedagogy or methodology. We value effective pedagogy and sound methodology, but your project must be driven by humanities content. Again, the NEH cannot fund tuition fees for student assistance, nor can it fund work undertaken in pursuit of an academic degree or individual research projects. Additionally, the NEH cannot fund things like social events, banquets, alcohol, or entertainment. Drafts are optional, but they're one of the best ways for you to get detailed and specific feedback about your application from an NEH program officer. Drafts should be submitted via email to hi@neh.gov by April 8th. I recommend sending your materials as email attachments. We aim to complete these and return feedback as quickly as possible, but please keep in mind that drafts submitted closer to or on the due date of April 8th may take longer to return. The narrative is generally the most helpful item to submit, but you are welcome to include other attachments like your reading list, work plan, and budget, especially if you have a particular question you'd like our program officers to address. If you're struggling to pull together a full narrative in time for the draft deadline, you're also welcome to send a sketch or outline of your project for more general feedback. If you would prefer to have a phone conversation to answer questions rather than submit a draft, please reach out to schedule a call. Reach out with what you've got. Some feedback is better than no feedback. Of course, the more complete, the more helpful the feedback that can be provided. Final applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 20th. Instructions on how to submit your final application via grants.gov are included in the NOFO. Please note, only complete applications submitted through grants.gov by the deadline will be reviewed. Don't wait until the last minute in case of technical issues, and to account for processing time to validate in the grants.gov system. It's also a good idea, especially if you're at a larger institution, to check with your institutional grant administrator or your grants office to see if they have an earlier internal deadline you'll also need to be aware of. When getting ready to submit your final application, the first step is to ensure that your SAM.gov and grants.gov registrations and passwords are current, because NEH will not grant deadline extensions for delayed registration. Registration in these systems can take up to a month to complete, so check on this straight away. Remember, you are applying as an institution, so you'll probably be using your institution's account information. Your institutional grant administrator or other grant management or sponsored program staff are great contacts for guidance if you're not sure where to find this information. When you're in grants.gov, be sure to select or have your grant admin select the appropriate package based on your project type so your application is evaluated appropriately. That is, for example, be sure to select the package for, say, HBCU versus the colleges and universities branch. This is a very common error, so be sure to double check with your grant admin that you or they have got the correct package for your project. Once you've pressed send, the waiting game begins. In July or August, applications will go to peer review panels for initial review. These panels consist of humanities scholars and past project directors whose input informs the foundation for subsequent recommendations. In November, applications will go before the NEH's National Council on the Humanities, and afterwards, final funding decisions will be made by law by the NEH chairperson. We expect decision notifications to be made in December for grants beginning as early as February 1st and as late as September 1st. As noted in the NOFO, we expect to award around 20 projects in this cycle, spread out among the Humanities Initiative's 5-branch programs. You can find each branch's 3-year averages by scrolling to the bottom of its respective program page. That said, we do not know going into any review panel or even when the National Council convenes exactly how many projects will ultimately be funded. Regardless of the outcome, you can get the most out of your relationship with the NEH by asking for reviewer comments once decisions have gone out in December, contacting us for additional feedback or guidance, volunteering to serve as an NEH panelist for an inside look at how the process works and what makes a strong application. If interested, you can sign up at this link or find it by Googling NEH panelist sign up. And finally, applying again for this and other grant opportunities.
So with that, thank you so much for joining us. Here is our contact information, which is also listed online and in the NOFO. And please don't hesitate to reach out with questions and drafts. We look forward to hearing from you and hopefully working with you on a project of your own. Thank you again for your time and for your interest in the NEH's Humanities Initiatives Grant Program.